Our first reading this morning is from the 116th Psalm, verses 1, 2, and 18 and 19. I love the Lord because he has heard my voice and my supplications, because he has inclined his ear to me. Therefore I will call on him as long as I live. I will pay my own vows to the Lord in the presence of all his people, in the courts of the house of the Lord, in your midst, O Jerusalem. Praise the Lord. Our second reading is from Luke chapter 24, verses 13 through 35. Now on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all the things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them said, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was one who was to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the third day since these things took place. Moreover, some women from our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all of the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening and the day is now nearly over." So he went in with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed it, and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while we were talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem. And they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. God bless the reading, hearing, and understanding of his word.
Paul, thank you so much for reading long scripture reading this morning. Do you like to walk? I know I do. And especially like to walk with somebody, because just like the kids were saying, when we are walking, we are talking. And it's amazing what you can talk about when you are walking. Because similar, now there's a new phenomenon out there. Not only, first of all, do I see people now, the weather is a little bit nicer, the kids are dropped off at school, and I see a lot of moms walking in the morning, or after work, I see people walking in the park or on the streets, which is great, especially on this Earth Day weekend. But something else is a phenomenon. It seems to me like recently so-called walking meetings have been established. Even a couple of weeks ago in the Forbes magazine was a big article about how to make walking meetings more successful. Well, even Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs are finding out the new phenomenon about walking meetings. And I just think, you know what? Just go back to the Bible. In today's story, it's about a walking meeting. Nothing really new under the sun. Walking meetings. The gospel reading only appears in the Gospel of Luke. And only here we have the person called Cleopas. Why not one of the other 12? If you haven't heard of him before, in my memory going through all the disciples you might have memorized in confirmation class, don't worry, he's only here. And the other person? Don't know. Don't know who that is. It could be you, or you, or you, or you, or even me, because scholars say Luke deliberately did not give the other person a name so that we can identify, so that we are actually on that walk from Jerusalem, 7 miles, because it says so, to Emmaus. And archaeologists try to find out, where is Emmaus? No clue. They didn't find it, because it could be anywhere. It could be starting from here to go to Easton. Or it could be go from here to go somewhere else. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that there are 2 people walking. 2 people who have heard and experienced what happened to Jesus walking. 2 people who are disappointed, who are sad. I can just see their heads hung low and just putting one foot in front of the other, trying to make sense of what happened. They had so many hopes in this person, in this Messiah who was going to save the world. And what happened? Crucified, he died, was put in a grave, and now women said he had appeared again. It doesn't make any sense. They're trying to figure this all out in their mind because that's just mind-boggling. Then, as they were walking, with their heads low, hope shattered, this other person joins them, and they had no idea who that is. Question, how long does it take for you, either with a friend or with a stranger, to talk about faith? A weekend? 3 days? 2 weeks? Years? I don't know. For these people, Cleopas and his friend, we assume that Jesus somehow on that journey, we do not really know when, joined them less than 2 hours to have the whole story down. I encourage you to do something like that. So if you're ever walking, even if you walk down the mall, less than 2 hours, maybe you can put your time on and tell me how long it took you with a stranger or even with your friend to talk about faith issues. So beat Cleopas and his friend. That is going to be my challenge for you. Number 1. And the challenge number 2 is, Paul, you were reading it, and I would like to criticize the version in our bulletin. Not because I know any more Greek or so on, but in verse 21, if you open your bulletin, right in the middle, more on the top than in the middle, it says in our version, in the New Revised Standard Version, but we had hoped. I'm sorry to say, it's supposed to say, but we were still hoping. It's a slight difference, because in the Greek, it is imperfect and not perfect. I'm not saying that this is perfect now and not perfect, but the grammar version is imperfect. That means, little grammar lesson in Greek. You start hoping then, and you continue to hope. The hope is still going on. It is not a complete chapter which only happened in the past. So if I were now giving you a little Greek lesson about the grammar, if I said we had walked last week, we walked then, walk is over. But if I'm saying we were walking, we are still walking and walking and walking and walking. See the difference? So imperfect means these disciples were hoping then, and despite their disappointment, despite of what's going on, what they cannot get into their brain, they are still hoping. That little glimmer of hope is still there. Reminds me of us, but we get to that one later. We were still hoping. That grammar form is only 2 times in Luke's gospel. Here, and 1 chapter before, when Jesus is in front of Herod. We were still hoping. We are not giving up hope, even though Jesus is confronting with Herod, the Roman occupier, and Jesus is dead now. We are still hoping. We were hoping, and we are not giving up. Listening to the news last week, we were still hoping. We were still hoping that if somebody knocked on the wrong door, somebody would open the door and maybe even greeting friendly. Or if somebody turns into the wrong driveway, we were still hoping that somebody could say, "Can I help you? I'm sorry, this is the wrong house." Or if somebody goes because they are teenagers having fun, turns into the wrong car, gets into the wrong car. We were still hoping and are still hoping that they'll stay safe. And if that basketball goes into your neighbor's yard, we are still hoping. We are still hoping that maybe the neighbor will pick up that ball, throws it over, and say, "Can I join you?" And that our kids are safe. We were still hoping, and we are still hoping, because we are not giving up. We are not giving up in this world. Because after all, this is Easter. And if these 2 guys, Cleopas and whoever it is, you or me or anybody else, are on that walk, and Jesus is walking with them, which walk are we on? How long is our walk? 7 miles? Longer? We are not giving up. We were still hoping, and we are still hoping, because it's Easter. We are still celebrating Easter for more than 1 day. Yes, I know the cheese and potatoes and the ham are gone. Fridge is empty, no more leftovers. But that doesn't mean that our hopes are shattered, because we are Easter people, and we are hoping for our kids, for our young people, and for all people in this world. That this Jesus, who is risen from the dead, is bringing us hope, giving us hope and new life, despite of what's going on in the world. And then, going back to our story, walking and walking, and they're inviting the stranger. Just hear the difference of what's going on in the world and in the Bible. They are inviting the stranger to come over and having dinner. And Jesus takes the bread, gives thanks, breaks it, and gives it to them. We think of communion because the same language is used as in communion. But what actually happened was they were having dinner together. Just like last night, many of us had progressive dinner together. We laughed and we talked and we ate and we had a good time. Let me ask you, did you experience Jesus there? I am sure Jesus showed up. Did you see him? Did you hear him? Who knows? Maybe he was just sitting next to you on this side or on that side or on that side. Who knows? But I know that there was Christian fellowship. And I know that there was hope and laughter and new life. Because that's what we're all for. And no, we're not at the end of the story yet. Keep with me. So they recognized Jesus. Jesus vanished like poof, up in open air. But what did they do? Cleopas and his friend recognized it was him. And after walking for 7 miles, and again, there was no smooth route, they thought this story is too good to be true. So they put their shoes back on and probably ran all the way back to Jerusalem. 7 more miles in the dark. And then it was not safe, because that story is too good to be not to be shared. Not to be shared in that little village Emmaus, which doesn't even exist anymore. So they had to go back to where the people are, go back to their friends, and tell them exactly what happened. No matter how long that road is, they put on their shoes and got going. And that's what our challenge is. If we experience the risen Christ, however in the ordinary lives it may be, put on your shoes, get going. Tell your friends, go back to Jerusalem where it all happened, and tell your friends what you just experienced. That even though it might be too good to be true and too unimaginable, it is real because you experienced it. So I just say to you, happy Easter, and go and tell the story.